Obedience is always and everywhere. The evidence is love and loyalty. In this video, my friends, we will discover the purpose of God's law. Jesus Christ said, "Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him." That is quoted from the book of John, chapter 14, verse 21. Jesus came to this world to save us from sin. The angel said to Joseph, "She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins." Now, to what is God's law likened? Paul says in Galatians 3 verse 24, "So the law was put in charge to lead us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith." The law which Paul mentioned here refers to the whole Jewish system. Therefore, when we come to verse 25, Paul is saying that no longer does Judaism function to point us to Christ. He has come. All of Israel's laws had served to point them to the Messiah. But when he comes, they rejected him. The next question is, what else is God's law likened to? Let's read it in James chapter 1 verse 23 to 25. "Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forget what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does." The verse is very clear. The law was compared also to a mirror. Now, does the law reveal God's will? Chapter 40 verse 8 of Psalm says, "I desire to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart." See, it reveals God's will. As Paul uses the term "end of the law" in Romans 10 verse 4, he means aim or objective. The aim or objective of the law is perfect obedience and righteousness. And this is the penitent sinner cannot render. Christ achieves this aim or objective of the law for him who believes in him. Believing in Christ, one is forgiven and accounted righteous. Now, why is it necessary to receive the Spirit of Christ into the heart? The answer can be found in Romans 8 verse 4. Let's read it together. "In order that the righteous requirements of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the sinful nature, but according to the Spirit." Yes, it is necessary to put the Spirit of Christ into our heart. It helps us to keep or follow the law, not to break the law. Next, how much of man's duty is revealed by God's law? Let's read this wonderful message in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 13 to 14. All has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Yes, we have a lot of duty in this world. But there is more important duty that God given to us, which is to follow his commandments. Like what the verse says, it is the whole duty of man. The law is universal. The commandment is universal. No one is exempted. Whether you are a Jewish, American, a Filipino, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, or whatever race you are required and welcome to follow these commandments that God given for all of us. Does God's law have anything to do with man's conversion? Let's read it again in book of Psalms 19 verse 7. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The law has no power to pardon transgression. The law reveals sin and points a person to Christ. When a person gazes at the law, with mind quickened by convicting Spirit of God, he sees his defilement and is then in a frame of mind to listen to a message that offers cleansing through Christ. Our last question: what does God's law have to do with the judgment? James 2 verse 12 says, "Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom." It is the standard by which all are to be judged through the commandments of God. In 1 John 5 verse 2, this is love for God, to obey His commands, and His commands are not burdensome. The verse is very clear. The law is not a burden for all of us who are willing to follow the commandments of God. The Bible mentions many blessings which attend to those who give heed to God's law. By them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow His precepts have good understanding. To Him belongs eternal praise. And that is the purpose of God's law. My friends, I encourage you, let us follow the commandments of God. David's decision relative to God's law, and it should be ours also.